The clock on the wall never moves. 60 seconds feel like 60 minutes as you stare at your phone, waiting for that call back from the interview. Your bank account shows 3 digits, barely enough for next week. The rejection letters pile up. The relationship lies in shambles. The diagnosis sits heavy in your chest. And still you wait. For what, exactly? For someone to notice your talent? For the right opportunity to appear? For the economy to improve? For your circumstances to change? For anyone to stand before you today with a truth that may sting at first, but will ultimately set you free? Nobody is coming to save you. No hero is on their way. No miracle is being prepared behind the scenes. No authority figure is about to discover your potential and elevate you to where you belong. The cavalry isn't coming. The knight in shining armor isn't galloping toward your tower. The fairy godmother isn't preparing to wave her wand. And in this brutal truth lies your greatest liberation. Let me ask you something deeply personal. What have you been postponing until help arrives? What dreams have you placed on hold while waiting for the perfect conditions? What potential lies dormant within you because you're waiting for someone else to activate it? We've created a culture of waiting. Waiting for permission, waiting for recognition, waiting for resources, waiting for validation. And in this waiting, we surrender the most precious resource we possess. Irreplaceable, non-renewable time. I met a woman who spent 20 years in a profession she despised because her parents had invested in her education. 20 years. 2 decades of her one precious life waiting for permission to pursue what truly ignited her spirit. When she finally gave herself that permission at age 45, she wept. Not from joy, but from the realization of all she had sacrificed at the altar of others' expectations. The waiting is a prison we build ourselves. Every day, you wait for external salvation as another brick in the wall that separates you from your authentic. That's this fundamental principle of nature. Nothing in creation waits for optimal conditions before fulfilling its purpose. The seed doesn't wait for perfect soil before it attempts to grow. The salmon doesn't wait for calmer waters before swimming upstream. The eagle doesn't wait for perfect weather before taking flight. They act with what they have, where they are. Why do we humans believe we're exempt from this universal law? I believe it stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of how breakthrough happens. We've been conditioned to believe that transformation comes from outside ourselves, that success, fulfillment, and purpose are bestowed rather than claimed. This is the great deception. The truth? Everything you're waiting for someone to give you is already within your possession. The permission you seek, the validation you crave, the resources you believe you lack, exist in forms you've overlooked because you're too busy looking toward the horizon for a savior. When you truly internalize that nobody is coming to save you, 3 remarkable transformations occur. First, you reclaim your power. As long as you believe your breakthrough depends on someone else, you remain powerless. When you accept that it depends on you, flawed, limited, but gloriously capable you reconnect with the immense creative force that has always resided within. Second, you develop resourcefulness. Necessity truly is the mother of invention. When you abandon the luxury of waiting for ideal circumstances, you discover capabilities within yourself that remain dormant in those still waiting to be rescued. Third, you experience authentic freedom. There is no freedom in dependency. True freedom emerges when you take full ownership of your life, your choices, your circumstances, your responses, your future. I spent time in a rural village devastated by a natural disaster. For months, the community waited for government assistance that never adequately materialized. Their homes remained damaged, their water supply compromised, their future uncertain. Then something shifted. A small group of residents, no more educated or privileged than their neighbors, decided to stop waiting. With minimal resources but unshakable determination, they began rebuilding. They developed innovative water filtration systems using available materials. They created new economic opportunities based on skills present in the community. Within a year, their section of the village was thriving, while those still waiting for external rescue continued to deteriorate. Same circumstances, same starting point, dramatically different out. The difference? One group understood that nobody was coming to save them. The other continued to wait. Now, let me address what might be troubling some of you. This truth that nobody is coming to save you might seem harsh. It might even seem to contradict certain spiritual or cultural teachings about community support and divine intervention. Let me be clear. Accepting that nobody is coming to save you doesn't mean you won't receive help. It doesn't mean you must isolate yourself from others or reject assistance when offered. It doesn't mean denying the reality of grace or synchronicity in life. What it means is that you stop placing the primary responsibility for your fulfillment, success, or healing on forces outside yourself. It means you stop using the absence of ideal support as an excuse for inaction. It means you recognize that whatever help does arrive will be most effective when it meets your own efforts halfway. There's a profound paradox here. When you stop expecting to be rescued, you often find the meaningful support you need. Why? Because people are drawn to those actively engaged in their own transformation. Resources flow toward those already in motion. Opportunities reveal themselves to those who have stopped waiting and started creating. Think about your own experience. Are you more inspired to help someone passively waiting for rescue, or someone actively working with whatever they have, however inadequate it might seem? The most powerful position is not one of entitled waiting, but of responsible action. Let me tell you about a young man I mentored. He grew up in circumstances that would justify perpetual victimhood, poverty, absent parents, inadequate education, neighborhood violence. By all conventional measures, he deserved to be rescued. When I met him, he was angry, not because help hadn't arrived, but because he had been taught to expect it. He had been told that systems should work better, that opportunities should be more equally distributed, that someone should fix the injustices that shaped his life. All true, all valid, all ultimately irrelevant to his immediate need to create a meaningful life. Our breakthrough came when he grasped that waiting for these shoulds to materialize was surrendering his power to forces beyond his control. The system should be better, but they weren't, and waiting for them to improve was costing him precious years. The opportunities should be more accessible, but they weren't, and waiting for that to change was dulling his creativity. The injustices should be remedied, but they hadn't been, and waiting for that remediation was keeping him locked in the very circumstances he wanted to escape. Once he embraced that nobody was coming to save him, not the government, not charitable organizations, not social justice movements, however noble their aims, his entire approach transformed. He stopped focusing on what he lacked and started leveraging what he possessed. He stopped blaming external factors and started taking ownership of his responses. He stopped waiting for the path to clear and started clearing it himself. Today, he not only thrives personally, but works to improve the very systems he once waited to rescue him. The irony isn't lost on him. It was only by stopping his wait for systemic saviors that he gained the power to help become one for others. Here's another dimension of the truth I'm sharing. When we individually stop waiting to be saved, we collectively become more capable of creating the conditions where fewer people feel the need for rescue in the first place. So what keeps us waiting? What prevents us from embracing the autonomous power that comes from accepting that nobody is coming to save us? Fear is the primary culprit. Fear of inadequacy, fear of failure, fear of responsibility. As long as we're waiting for rescue, we don't have to confront these fears. Waiting provides the perfect alibi for inaction. Then there's the comfort of blame. As long as our unfulfilled potential can be attributed to the rescue that never came, our ego remains protected. Our self-image stays intact. Our narrative of what could have been if only remains unchallenged. Additionally, Many of us have been conditioned from childhood to seek external validation and permission before acting. Our educational systems, family dynamics, and cultural institutions often reward compliance and patience over autonomous initiative. We've been trained to wait for the authority figure's nod before we proceed. But none of these factors, fear, the comfort of blame, or conditioned dependency, is stronger than your capacity to choose differently today. The truth that nobody is coming to save you isn't a verdict of abandonment. It's an invitation to sovereignty. It's not a statement of cosmic indifference, but of your inherent capacity. When you embrace this truth, you stop viewing your circumstances as prison walls and start seeing them as the raw materials from which you can craft a meaningful life. You stop experiencing your limitations as punishment and start recognizing them as the necessary resistance that builds strength. Most importantly, you stop deferring your life. You stop placing your dreams, ambitions, healing, and growth on hold while waiting for conditions that may never materialize. You start living fully, purposefully, powerfully now with whatever you have, wherever you are. I want you to consider something that might initially seem unrelated, but reveals a profound truth about human potential. Throughout history, some of the most remarkable achievements, innovations, and expressions of the human spirit emerged not from optimal conditions, but from significant constraint. Great art created in prison cells, groundbreaking innovations born in resource-scarce environments, movements for justice led by those with seemingly no power, businesses built from nothing but determination and creativity. These weren't accomplished by people waiting to be saved from their circumstances. They were accomplished by people who understood that the circumstances themselves, however challenging, however unfair, contained within them the seeds of possibility. What constraints are you facing right now? What limitations have you been viewing as reasons to wait rather than invitations to create? What if? Just consider the possibility. These very constraints could become the catalyst for your greatest contribution. I'm not romanticizing hardship. I'm not suggesting that injustice, inequality, or suffering are somehow beneficial. What I'm suggesting is that waiting for these conditions to change before you fully engage with your life and purpose ensures only one outcome: a life partially lived. So I ask you today, what would change if you completely abandoned the belief that someone or something external holds the key to your next level? What actions would you take if you fully embraced that while circumstances may limit your options, they never eliminate your agency? What would you attempt if you stopped waiting for permission and started granting it to yourself? What dreams would you pursue if you released the need for perfect conditions? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're invitations to a profound shift in how you engage with your one irreplaceable life. I want to be absolutely clear about something. Embracing that nobody is coming to save you doesn't mean adopting a mindset of isolated self-sufficiency. It doesn't mean rejecting connection, community, or collaboration. It doesn't mean you shouldn't seek help, accept support, or acknowledge your interdependence with others. What it does mean is that you stop outsourcing the primary responsibility for your fulfillment, success, or healing. It means you approach relationships not from dependency, but from self-directed wholeness. It means you seek partnerships rather than rescuers, collaboration rather than salvation, support rather than deliverance. The most meaningful connections are forged between individuals who aren't trying to rescue or be rescued, but who join their autonomous strengths toward shared purpose. I want you to do something right now. Take a deep breath. Feel the air fill your lungs. That breath, that simple autonomic process, contains within it a profound truth. You already possess the most essential resource for transformation. As long as you have breath, you have the capacity to act rather than merely be acted upon. Now consider one area of your life where you've been waiting for rescue. Just one. The relationship that needs healing, the career that needs advancement, the purpose that needs clarification, the health that needs restoration. What's the first step you would take if you knew with absolute certainty that no external savior was coming? What action would you implement today? Not tomorrow, not next week, but today. if you fully accepted that your transformation depends primarily on you. This isn't about denying reality. It's not about pretending that systems, circumstances, relationships, and resources don't impact your journey. It's about recognizing that your response to these factors ultimately shapes your destiny far more than the factors themselves. The liberation I'm describing doesn't come from changed circumstances, but from changed ownership. It comes from the courageous decision to stop waiting and start creating, to stop blaming and start claiming, to stop deferring and start living. Nobody is coming to save you. And in that stark, uncompromising truth lies your greatest freedom, your deepest power, and your most authentic path to the life you're capable of creating. The choice is yours. It has always been yours. Will you continue waiting for a rescue that isn't coming? Or will you become your own hero? I believe you'll choose the latter. I believe there's something within you that resonates with this truth, however uncomfortable it might initially be. I believe there's a part of you that's weary of waiting, tired of dependency, and ready to claim the full authority of your life. That readiness is the first spark of a fire that, properly tended, will illuminate not just your path, but the paths of countless others who are still waiting in the darkness for someone to save them. Be that light. Claim your power. Embrace the liberating truth that nobody is coming to save you. And in doing so, discover that you never needed saving in the first place. What happens in that moment when you finally accept that nobody's coming to save you? When the truth sinks past intellectual understanding and penetrates the core of your being, first comes grief. Grief for the time wasted waiting. Grief for the dreams deferred. Grief for the comfort of dependency abandoned. This grief is necessary. Honor it, feel it fully, but don't camp there. It's merely the threshold you cross to enter a new territory of personal power. After grief comes clarity, crystal clear vision untainted by the fog of false expectation. You begin to see opportunities that were always present, but invisible to eyes scanning the horizon for rescue. You recognize resources within and around you that remained unutilized while you waited for the perfect provision from elsewhere. Against rebirth. You emerge from the cocoon of dependency, not as a victim seeking salvation, but as a creator generating solutions. This metamorphosis doesn't happen overnight. It unfolds through daily choices to own your circumstances, rather than be owned by. I know a brilliant musician who spent 15 years waiting to be discovered. He had extraordinary talent, but believed the narrative that success required being plucked from obscurity by industry gatekeepers. He sent demos to record labels. He auditioned for competitions. He networked relentlessly, all important actions, but all founded on the premise that his breakthrough depended on external selection. Year after year, rejection accumulated. Bitterness grew. His creativity diminished as his art became not expression but audition. His joy vanished as music transformed from passion to petition. His transformation began with a simple but profound shift. Nobody is coming to discover me. I must discover myself. He stopped creating music to impress gatekeepers and started creating from authentic inspiration. He stopped chasing industry approval and started building direct connections with listeners. He stopped viewing technology disruption as a threat and started leveraging digital platforms to reach audiences independently. Today, he sustains himself entirely through his art, not as a superstar, but as a sovereign creator with devoted followers who value his authentic expression. His music has more depth, more truth, more impact than when he was crafting it as bait for industry attention. Most revealing, several of those same gatekeepers who rejected him now approach him. Not as saviors offering rescue, but as potential partners attracted to the momentum he generated himself. That journey illustrates a universal principle. The energy you spend waiting for rescue can be redirected toward creating solutions. And when you do this, you often attract the very opportunities you were waiting for. But they arrive not as salvation, but as collaboration between equal. Now, let's confront the most insidious objection to this message. The voice that whispers, but my situation is different. I really don't have the resources, connections, cost, cal, for it to change my circumstances. This belief is the final fortress of dependency, and it must be challenged directly. Throughout human history, individuals with fewer resources than you have overcome greater obstacles than you face. This isn't motivational hyperbole. It's documented reality. The refugee who rebuilds life in a strange land with nothing but determination. The person born in extreme poverty who creates prosperity through persistent creativity. The individual with physical limitations who accomplishes what the able-bodied consider impossible. What distinguished these individuals wasn't superhuman capacity. It was their refusal to wait for ideal conditions before beginning. Their unwillingness to outsource responsibility for their destiny. When you claim, "My circumstances are uniquely limiting," you make two profound errors. First, you underestimate your capacity for creative problem solving. Second, you overestimate the importance of external factors relative to internal response. I'm not suggesting your challenges aren't real. They are. I'm not claiming your limitations don't exist. They do. I'm stating that within those very real constraints exists space for meaningful action and creation that remains unexplored as long as you're waiting for rescue. Consider the remarkable story of a community facing water scarcity in an arid region. For generations, they petitioned authorities for infrastructure development. Some assistance came, but never enough. Their existence centered around the narrative of deprivation and the need for external salvation. Then one elder began studying the traditional water harvesting techniques their ancestors had used centuries before. Knowledge abandoned when modernization promised easier solutions. These methods required significant collective effort, but could be implemented with locally available materials and knowledge. Initially, many resisted. Why should we exhaust ourselves when the government should provide this basic need? But as a small group began implementing these techniques and demonstrating results, participation grew. Within 5 years, they had developed a water management system that not only met their basic needs, but enabled agricultural expansion. They still advocated for their right to modern infrastructure, but from a position of self-determined sufficiency rather than desperate dependency. What changed wasn't their external reality. The climate remained arid, the political priorities remained unchanged. What transformed was their relationship to the challenge. They stopped defining themselves by what they lacked and started creating with what they possessed. And this illustrates another dimension of the principle that nobody is coming to save you. When you embrace this truth collectively, you can achieve together what would be impossible in isolated self-sufficiency. The opposite of waiting for rescue isn't isolated individualism. It's self-directed interdependence, communities of sovereign individuals combining their autonomous strengths towards shared aims. Now, let's address another objection I often hear. If I fully accept that nobody is coming to save me, I'll lose hope. This misunderstands the nature of genuine hope. Authentic hope isn't passive expectation that circumstances will magically improve. It isn't wishful thinking that someone will notice your suffering and alleviate it. Such hope is merely disguised helplessness. True hope is active. It's the unshakable conviction that your actions matter, that your choices shape outcomes, that your response to circumstances carries more weight than the circumstances themselves. It's the determination to create meaning, even when meaning isn't immediately evident. When you abandon the false hope of external rescue, you make space for the authentic hope of internal agency. You trade the fantasy of being saved for the reality of becoming increasingly capable of navigating life's complexities from your own center of gravity. I've worked with people recovering from addiction, and they consistently describe this transition. As long as they hope for something external to solve their problem, a perfect treatment program, a particular therapeutic approach, a specific relationship, their recovery remained fragile. Sustainable transformation began when they accepted that while support was valuable, the core responsibility for their healing couldn't be outsourced. This principle extends far beyond addiction recovery. It applies to every area where meaningful change is desired. The parent hoping schools will instill values they're unwilling to embody at home. The professional expecting recognition for contributions they haven't clearly communicated. The citizen waiting for political leaders to create the social conditions they aren't personally helping build. The individual hoping for better health while deferring basic self-care. In each case, outsourced responsibility creates the illusion of virtuous waiting while actually perpetuating the very conditions one hopes to transcend. Let me be absolutely clear. This message isn't about blaming victims of genuinely oppressive circumstances. It isn't about denying systemic injustice or structural inequality. It isn't about minimizing the very real advantages some possess and others don't. It's about recognizing that waiting for these realities to change before you claim your power ensures only one outcome: a life suspended in perpetual deferment. You can acknowledge injustice while refusing to grant it authority over your response. You can recognize inequality while declining to make it the determining factor in your story. You can name your legitimate disadvantages while simultaneously leveraging your unique strengths. This is the paradoxical power of accepting that nobody is coming to save you. It frees you to work toward changing the very systems you've stopped waiting to rescue you. Those who have most effectively challenged oppressive systems throughout history weren't those who waited passively for conditions to improve. They were those who refused to defer their dignity, their agency, or their responsibility to create a more just reality. They accepted that salvation wouldn't arrive from existing power structures and became the architects of new possibilities. If we're honest, the waiting stance often masks something deeper: fear of our own potential. As author Marianne Williamson famously observed, for many people, the greatest fear isn't inadequacy, but the prospect of being powerful beyond measure. As long as we're waiting for rescue, we don't have to confront the awesome responsibility of our own capability. We don't have to face the vertigo that comes with recognizing our creative potential. We don't have to wrestle with the implications of our capacity to generate meaningful change. Waiting keeps us small, safe, comfortable. It provides the perfect alibi for dreams unpursued, gifts unopened, contributions unmade. Are you willing to consider that your waiting isn't primarily about external limitations, but about internal resistance to your own magnificence? This isn't asked to shame you, but to illuminate a possibility. Perhaps what holds you back isn't what's missing from your life, but what's present yet unacknowledged. Your inherent capacity to create, to adapt, to transform, to grow, to lead, to love, to serve, to build, to heal. The psychologist Abraham Maslow noted that many people suffer from what he called the Jonah complex, the fear of one's highest possibilities. Like the biblical Jonah who fled from his calling, we often run from our potential, finding comfort in stories of inadequate resources, insufficient support, or unique limitation. What if your perceived inadequacies aren't obstacles to your purpose, but invitations to develop precisely the capacities that fulfilling your purpose require? What if the support you believe is missing is unnecessary for your next step? What if the limitations you perceive as permanent are actually temporary conditions that will yield to persistent creative engagement? These aren't comfortable questions. They disrupt the narrative of justified waiting. They challenge the identity built around what you lack rather than what you possess. They confront the convenient belief that your fulfillment depends primarily on factors beyond your control. I'm inviting you to consider a radical alternative. Everything essential for your next level of growth, contribution, and fulfillment is already within your reach. It may not match your preconception of what progress should look like. It may require creativity you haven't yet expressed. It may demand courage you're still developing, but it exists, waiting not for external rescue, but for internal recognition and activation. This brings us to another dimension of the truth that nobody is coming to save you. The resources for meaningful action are closer and more accessible than your waiting mindset allows you to perceive. I work with entrepreneurs in resource-constrained environments, and I have observed a fascinating pattern. Those who succeed aren't those with the most obvious advantages, but those most willing to leverage non-obvious resources. They recognize value in connections, knowledge, experiences, and assets that others overlook. They transform limitations into different. They convert constraints into catalysts for innovation. What resources are hiding in plain sight in your life? What assets have you discounted because they don't match your preconception of what progress requires? What strengths have you undervalued because they came naturally rather than through struggle? The answers to these questions reveal pathways forward that become visible only when you abandon the waiting posture and adopt the stance of creative responsibility. This perspective transforms how you experience challenges. When you're waiting for rescue, problems appear as evidence of neglect or abandonment, further proof that the help you deserve hasn't arrived. When you embrace that nobody is coming to save you, those same challenges become invitations to develop capacities you'll need for your larger purpose. The obstacle becomes the way. The resistance becomes the strengthening force. The constraint becomes the creative catalyst. This isn't positive thinking. It's strategic perception. It's recognizing that while you can't always choose your circumstances, you retain the ultimate power. The power to determine what those circumstances mean and how you'll respond to them. This power remains untapped as long as you're waiting for conditions to improve before you fully engage. I mentor young leaders, and I've noticed something revealing. Those who make the most significant impact aren't those with perfect preparation or ideal support systems. They're those willing to begin with whatever they have, wherever they are, however inadequate it might initially seem. They understand intuitively what author Stephen Pressfield articulates. Start before you're ready. They recognize that waiting for perfect readiness ensures only one outcome, never starting at all. What project purpose or passion are you postponing until conditions improve? What contribution are you deferring until you feel fully prepared? What difference are you waiting to make until external factors align? I challenge you to begin now, not with some idealized version of action that circumstances don't currently support, but with the meaningful step that is available to you today, however small it might seem. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. If you can't crawl, identify one thing within your immediate control and transform it. Movement itself generates momentum that opens possibilities invisible from the static position of waiting. Remember, rescue fantasies keep you focused on what's missing. Responsible action keeps you engaged with what's possible. One perpetuates limitation. The other generates transformation. There's a pivotal moment when you truly accept that nobody is coming to save you. In this moment, something fundamental shifts. The world transforms from a series of problems into a canvas for creation. You stop seeing yourself as broken and in need of rescue. You recognize that while you have wounds and limitations, these don't define your capacity to create change. I counseled a man devastated by business betrayal. For 2 years, he remained frozen, organizing his life around waiting for justice. His healing began when he grasped a simple truth. Waiting for justice is still waiting. He realized that while the betrayal was real, his response remained his sovereign territory. As he shifted from waiting for validation to taking responsibility, new possibilities emerged. Today, he leads an organization that not only surpassed his previous success, but operates with integrity principles inspired by the very betrayal that once paralyzed him. Accepting that nobody is coming to save, it doesn't mean rejecting help when available. It means approaching help not from dependent waiting, but from self-directed action already in progress. Those who embrace this truth often receive more meaningful help than those perpetually waiting. Why? Because people invest in journeys already in motion. Resources flow toward established momentum. Opportunities reveal themselves to active creators, not passive waiters. The help you're waiting for often becomes available only after you stop waiting for it. What dream have you placed on hold while waiting for rescue? What potential remains unexpressed because conditions haven't perfectly aligned? The cost isn't merely personal, it's universal. The world needs what only you can give. As we conclude, remember, your cage has always been open, The waiting wasn't imposed by external barriers, but by internal hesitation. Will you remain within the familiar confinement of dependency? Or will you step beyond the threshold of wading into the uncertain, exhilarating territory of self-directed creation? Choose wisely, choose boldly, choose now. Nobody is coming to save you. And that, my friend, is the most liberating news you'll ever receive.